it's more just a mark of quality for me than it is like to have a sound. I want the band to sound like the band. I just want to make a really good version of what that band is.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, if you want to support the podcast, I have a Patreon. It's $1 a month over at patreon.com/thiswasthescene. $1 a month equates to about 2.5 cups of Starbucks coffee a year that you'd miss out on. So if you've been listening for a while and want to support this thing and help keep the lights on, then that's one really good way to do it. You can also go buy merch and follow my Instagram at thiswasthescene. Just look that up on Instagram and you can find it. Steve Evetts is an American record producer who has produced music for Alesana, Poison the Well, Static Lullaby, the Dillinger Escape Plan, Sepultura, Symphony X, Saves the Day, Lifetime, Kid Dynamite, Hightower, Story of the Year, Every Time I Die, Earth Crisis, Still Remains, Our Last Night, and The Wonder Years. And that's not even like half the fucking list. He's been an active producer since 1992, producing mostly metal albums as well as indie and emo bands. I found out about Steve when I was like 17 or 18 because he produced Lifetime, Saves the Day, Snapcase, and these are some of my favorite albums back then. So this guy's been on my radar for a couple decades, and I never knew at 18 I'd be doing a podcast where I can actually interview him. So the fact that I got to do this and I reached out to him for a couple of years, literally hounding him, and he finally said, yeah, I got some time, let's do this. So I was really excited to just sit down and ask questions that 18-year-old me has been wondering for a very long time. So we got Steve on the Skype, and this is what we chat about. Saves the Day, his 30-year career, how many days it took to make Calculating Infinity, Dead Guy, who won't he work with, Lifetime, a Snapcase snare sound and progression through Unlearning, Frankie Arrow, Ross Robinson, Vanilla Ice, The Cure, Kid Dynamite, the story behind Let It Enfold You getting leaked. I think a bunch of us still want to know if Dave from Taxicab Samurai is the guy on the cover of the album. Homegrown and a ton more. Lastly, if you have a marketing department that was like, hey, we need an explainer video, whiteboard animation, or logo animation, that's what I do for a living. It's my full-time gig. I work for myself for 19 years, and I've been doing animation full-time since 2011. So if you need someone who kicks ass, gets the job done, has really good communication, and meets deadlines, then email me at mike@drive80.com. You can also check out my work at drive80.com, drive80.com. That's all I got to say, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. Yeah, because I mean, Chris definitely went through some shit with all that stuff that was going on with him. So
yeah, he's in it. I mean, like I said, God, I've known Chris since he was 15, which is crazy. We did the original Sepultura demos at Trax East, at my old studio, Trax East. They were on break from like being a junior in high school. We did those. It was like May of whatever year it was, 97, 96, well, no, 97, I guess. That was, I don't know if, did you interview Chris or no?
I interviewed Brian.
You interviewed Brian, okay. Well, I'm sure he would tell the same story, but so when we did the Sepultura demo, it was before they were Saves the Day, he did the Sepultura demos. It was Chris, Brian, and I don't remember if it was Justin and Anthony who were on Cancel It Down, but they really didn't play anything. Really, Chris played all the guitar, and I think like Justin did pick slide, and that was about it. So we did the Sepultura demos at my studio, sitting in the control room, and then Sean McGrath, who was the bass player on Cancel It Down and was a mouthpiece, was the one who named the band and literally said, hey, I always thought Saves the Day would be a cool name for a band. So they literally changed the name on the cassette after I mixed down the demo to Saves the Day instead of Sepultura. Like we literally, I was there when the actual band was named.
When they said that, what were your thoughts on the name?
Oh, I mean, I didn't really think much. And look at that. Now see the AirPod's disconnected. You figure I know how to run a recording studio. I would understand technology, but let's try it again. Connecting.
So funny thing is that Brian sent me, he's like, hey, I'm going to send you like something. And he sent me this Sepultura 7-inch.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it says it's Dave, Brian, Chris, and Justin inside the sleeve.
But that Sepultura 7-inch, I think that was a different, I don't think that's not the one I recorded, because all that stuff, the original Sepultura demos basically made it on that Ups and Downs release for Saves the Day. That's why it's like half the songs on Ups and Downs are songs that were from Can't Slow Down plus other ones, but it was all recorded in one day, in like a 1 day session.
So fucking
in like
great.
May of '97. That's all they could. They scraped up the money, and that's all they could afford. They just got 1 day with me in the studio, and we banged it out.
Did you kind of like have any gut feeling about these guys that they were going to become what they were, or just didn't even think about it at the time?
During the Sepultura demos, no, because I mean, I had done already Lifetime, Hello Bastards, and Jersey's Best Dancers, and it was like they clearly, obviously loved Lifetime from the origins of the band, and like they definitely had a little bit of there was a little bit of that element. It was when we did Can't Slow Down. It was really like Jody and like 3 Miles Down and stuff like that that led me to believe that they could be something more.
What was it about? Was it like Chris's lyrics, his voice, the structure, like the band sound?
Lyrics. It was just all of it. It was just because some of the early stuff like Handsome Boy and like stuff like that, and like sometimes New Jersey, you could hear it. I mean, it's like obviously a heavy Lifetime influence. And then when they started breaking off to the other stuff, it was like, okay, so there's other influences at play here, and they're gonna. It seems like they could be more. They could go in a different direction instead of just. And it was the songs were cool regardless whether they're an homage to Lifetime or not. But I thought those particular ones, really could point to, okay, they've got something else here going on. There's something working behind the scenes. And then when I got the demos for Through Being Cool, obviously that was like a quantum leap from where they were, and it was like going a little more in the rock side of things rather than just like doing the fast, the fast, melodic hardcore beat.
I think it's just thinking about that. The leaps between those three albums are so grand that it's almost interesting to me that the scene at the time accepted that, because usually if someone sounds like something, they wanted that to continue. But every time a new record came out, we were like, oh, we're into this, where that really worked. I think by the time they got to the Sound the Alarm one, I think that's where it was kind of like, I don't think it's, I think some people dropped off from that.
Oh, I mean, I love Sound the Alarm, because to me, and in retrospect, at the time, I was all about like just like that feeling of like that energy, like that we got on the first two records, and even those two songs in between, Through Being Cool and when they went to do Stay What You Are. We did those two songs that was on that Vagrant comp. That's a lot of people's favorite from that era, Saves the Day songs, The Sell My Old Clothes, I'm Up to Heaven, and Dragging D Flat. So when they did In Reverie at first, I was like, I wasn't into it because it was so different. I mean, but looking back, yeah, maybe in execution, whatever, but in general, there's some like unbelievably clever and well-crafted songs, and the chord progressions. So like from a pure musical standpoint, there's like amazing stuff going on that record. At the time, I was very like, no, it just doesn't have enough like oomph to it. It just feels a little too lazy. It just feels blah blah blah, this and that. I mean, it's still an unbelievably great record.
I love that record. I think that record's awesome. I loved it when it came out. I was surprised.
See, I wasn't into it when it came out, but then later on, I kind of got it. It clunked into place, and I love like the Beatles and Beach Boys. And I knew when I saw them on Stay What You Are tour, I was in, what was I ran into them. I actually ran into them I was in Vegas, and they played Vegas on that tour. And I was hanging out in the back with Chris, and he was just like so into the Beatles and Brian Wilson and like Beach Boys and all these really complex chord progressions and chord structures and harmonies. And he's just like, he wanted to really go there. And he did with that record for sure. There's some really, really brilliant moments on that record. But at the time, I was very like, no. So then when we did Sound the Alarm, and they brought me back in the fold to do that, I was like very like, all right, we're gonna bring back that energy and that, and I really love. There's some really great stuff on that record.
Yeah, it's like I think the progression just for me fan-wise, and again, it's like I'm not, if I don't like, or if I didn't like something, or if it's not my favorite, it's just, that's just my thing. I'm never being like, oh, that was crap, It's not like I thought it was just that one for me. I don't know, I just didn't like where he took his voice, I guess, because I got so used to all the records, and I got to in Reverie. I like that, and they went to Southern Alarm. It was really pushing it, and I got what was happening at that time. I think also sometimes by like the fifth record album of a band, I start to just kind of lose a little bit with that. But I did like Under the Boards and Daylight.
Oh,
think also.
I love Under the Boards out of the trilogy of those records, because some of the songs we recorded on Sound the Alarm actually wound up on Under the Boards. Not my recorded version of it, but on Under the Boards, Bye Bye Baby, Whoa, Getaway. We all did versions of that for Sound the Alarm, but they just never made the cut. So those songs were all like there already. A lot of those songs were there, and then even some of the other ones that I knew. But like Can't Stay the Same, what a great song! That Radio song, unbelievable. And that Whoa song is really just like spectacular too. It's so different. And it's heavy, and it's really cool.
I'm impressed that you remember all the song names. Can you do that with all of your albums you've done?
Not all, but usually it takes a second, but things clunk into place. I have a remarkable way to recall things. A lot of people go, "Your memory is just so good," and it's just like, I don't know. It just if I start talking about a process of things, sometimes things just pop into my head, like, "Oh, and then I go, "Oh yeah," and then there was that thing that happened, and then I guess it's just details and like little stuff, and that's kind of why I do what I do, because everything I do is about paying attention to details and little minutia that a lot of people don't notice.
When you're like remembering that stuff, right? Because I know for me that I can remember a lot from back then, just because I would take a lot of photos and I remembered reading things, and so visually, I'm like when I'm remembering something, I'm seeing it in my head almost like the moment I learned about it. So
When you were in Laymeyer, do you remember like writing? Do you remember like specific shows? Do you remember like? I guess it's no different.
yeah, that's all I guess.
Music is very much associated with memories. Like it's a good way. That's why like Alzheimer's patients, they can't remember someone's name, but they'll remember a song. There's music is so ingrained in our DNA. It's just a different thing. It affects us, I think, at the cellular level to some degree. I don't know that for a fact, but it feels like it does, because it's so, you can't remember certain facts, but you can remember a song. Or you don't remember the song right away, but as soon as you start singing it, or it's on the radio and you sing along with it, then you'll remember all the words. So it's like, why is that? The magic of it, and it's something that still, I get a kick out of it still to this day, which is why I still love doing what I do.
Well, I was thinking just visually when you're remembering the songs, like are you seeing kind of like yourself in the studio where it's like written down on a piece of paper and they're do it like do you remember moments like that, or you just remember like the back of the album?
No, I remember moments for sure.
That's pretty basic, especially since you've been doing this for uh 30 years.
Almost 30 years, which is insane. Technically, really, it's been over 30 years, but my career really, really started about 29 years ago. In reality, like there's a few records I did early on in the early 90s, but I don't really consider that. It's really more just like my apprenticeship per se. And I did do some records, like I did the very first Lifetime 7-inch in 1991, which is crazy. The one on New Age Records, the guy in the straitjacket on the cover. Again, I don't consider that. That's like whatever. I was doing that stuff, like recording, my own band or whatever, just doing like stuff with a 4-track or whatever. And then I got to actually work at Tracks East, which was my old band, which was like a kind of more like that, if you want to consider it hair metal or whatever. But like it was in that scene, because that was a big scene in Jersey. Obviously, you know that from growing up there. And then I came from that scene originally, and then we did our record at Tracks East with Eric, Rachel, and then I started working there, because that's always what I wanted to do. Like even when I was in a band and we had a record deal and whatever, and like I would always say like, boy, I hope the band like sells huge, goes big, because I want to own my own recording studio. Like that was always the goal.
So were you like, did you get involved in the scene because of like you were more in the hair metal thing, and then like did you get any punk part, or like did you get into punk rock because of you recording then?
No. I got into punk rock from, well, a couple of guys in my band. One guy in my band, my guitar player, was really into a lot of like punk and metal, and then actually the gateway, ironically, was the band Living Color.
Oh, okay.
I saw them early on before they were really popular. We saw him at the you remember the Green Parrot in Neptune? It's a small little club, maybe 150 cap at the max, I think. There's no stage. They played on the floor, and they were awesome. They were like the buzz thing, like, yeah, go see Living Color. And we saw them, and then Vernon Reid the guitar player would talk to the crowd and goes, hey, if you like us, check out the Bad Brains and check out Fishbone, because that's where we got our thing from. And I'm like, okay. So I checked out the Bad Brains, and that was my gateway was Living Color into the Bad Brains, and then that's what got me into punk.
Was your first band like a punk band, or were you hair metal?
No, I guess it wasn't hair metal because we were pretty heavy, but we definitely had like harmonies and stuff like that. It was pop, but it was also, the guitars were really heavy. It wasn't like really fluffy kind of stuff.
I mean, I've definitely noticed a pattern in a lot of releases you have, and I figured I was going to ask this later, but I think it kind of makes sense now. Like, you kind of to me, it seems like you tend to work with harder bands throughout your history. Would that be accurate, or do you think it's balanced?
It's balanced. Like I've always liked I like both, because I liked a lot of like really heavy stuff too, and I love, to me, in that scene or in the metal or punk thing, like going from like the end of my Tracks East run, like 99 was like I made Dillinger Calculating Infinity, and then right into Through Being Cool, and then right into Snapcase Designs for Automotion. I like going back and forth between like super heavy and then the poppier side of things. Even more recently, like with the newer pop punk stuff, I did a Wonder Years record right into a Suicide Silence record.
Do you kind of plan? I mean, I guess you can't plan that because you can't plan when a band is going to record.
No, we can't plan it for sure.
But do you kind of find, like, through those years when you were doing a lot of harder bands, when a not softer but like less heavy band would come in, you would be like, oh, okay, or it's just like, I'm just on all the time. I just do what I do.
I guess do what I do is whatever. It's just like I don't try to. If I had to take from anything, is that I try not to have a sound particularly. It's really just to take what the band does and just try to maximize that, as opposed to fitting someone into a formula. It's a very common thing now that guys have a sound, like, oh, we'll go to this guy, his sound. But it's more just a mark of quality for me than it is like to have a sound. I want the band to sound like the band. I just want to make a really good version of what that band is.
I feel it's funny you saying that, because when I listen back to a lot of the early releases that you have, like, 'cause I mean, I was a big Lifetime fan, fucking Snapcase, so I definitely want to talk about Progression Through Unlearning. I mean, you saw that post I shared about the snare sound.
The snare sound. I've answered many questions about that snare sound.
I know. I was kind of like, when I was thinking of this, I was like, I know he's probably talked about that fucking snare sound. I'm like, I just want it eventually, I probably have I want to kind of dig more into it, but
that's fine. I'm ready for it.
I think if I listen to those records, though, the thing I can hear with your style is it's very tight. There's, to me, in a lot of the stuff you did early on, it feels like there was no looseness to it. Not in a bad way, but I feel like everything was tight as fuck, and you can hear that in a lot of those like late '90s albums.
Sure, it's tight, but it's also not mechanical. It's just the band playing tightly. It's just the band like having, just making sure that they're up to snuff. That's really it. I don't like perfect at all. It just has to feel right to me. And especially those records, you got to remember those records are all done on tape. That's not going to a computer. That's not Pro Tools. And you still got that level of tightness. So it's literally listening and feeling and going, how does this feel to me? And it's like, it's never been like yes, you're perfect right there. Like, perfect sucks. Perfect's boring. It's just about what the feeling I'm craving when I hear the band, when I see them live, and it's just like I want to get that and try to capture that energy and that punch and that tightness in the studio.
I feel like there was a record I saw back then where they gave you credit, and it was like, Steve, do it again, Evetts.
One more time. That's Progression.
One more time. Yeah, that was it. Like, so is that your style in the studio? Like, do you make people do it over and over again until they get it?
Yeah, it's just, that's it. It's literally as simple as that. It didn't feel right. One more time. One more time. One more time. One more time. And look, if they get it on the first take, awesome. I'm not going to make someone do it over again just to like torture them, just to drill it into their heads. I don't enjoy doing it. I'd rather them play it on the first shot and you go, okay, great, makes my life easy, you know. But I mean, they're entrusting me to get this thing to a certain level, so and that's all I'm doing.
Has there been any bands over the last 30 years where you were surprised, you were like, wow, we got this done pretty quickly because they were that good in the beginning and they just didn't take that many takes?
Yeah, it's happened for sure.
Would Dillinger be one of those bands?
Dillinger's a different thing, especially calculating, because that again, when you hear that record, that's done to tape. That's people can't believe that when they listen to Dillinger, they think they hear and they go, "That you actually recorded that's a 2-inch tape, analog tape." Yeah, yes, we did in 13 days. I mean, that's the thing. Here's the thing: 13 days to make a record. When I did Snapcase Progression Through Learning, that was 2 weeks, including mixing. You don't have enough time to make it perfect. And again, I don't want it perfect anyway. It just has to go. It's always down to a very simple decision. It's like a flow. It's like the old school flow charts you learned when you were growing up in school. Is this good? Yes. Good. Move on. No. Go back to the beginning. Do it again. It's that simple. It's just feel good. Yes. Awesome. Move on. No. All right. Let's try again.
I don't know, man. Those records, they sound so tight to me. Like I can hear, like I don't hear, I don't know. I don't think I ever really hear any fuck ups and stuff, but I just felt like those were just tight. Like you guys just nailed it. Like for those
But the
ones you
funny
talked
thing is,
about.
when I listen to that stuff, I have some transfers into Pro Tools, and it's like it's tight, but it's not that tight. I mean, like the way things are now, where everybody just like uses Pro Tools and they chop out all the spaces in between the notes, like it's like super tight. And it's like it sounds so boring and fake. It does not make you feel anything. To me, it's the absolute antithesis of what I'm trying to go for. Some people think that's better production, quote unquote, air quotes, that if it's that tight, it's so tight. It's like I don't care. To me, it just has to feel right, and it's just a gut thing, and that's it.
Does every band give you a demo before they record with you?
Most of them, yeah. I mean, very rarely do we get in the studio without hearing anything, and we just write. I mean, there's all those things we write in the studio. On Progression, we did the Zombie Prescription, which is one of their more popular songs. We came up with that in the studio.
They wrote that song in the studio?
Wrote that song in the studio, and don't mind you, we did Progression in 2 weeks.
Wait, they just were dicking around the guitar? Because that riff.
Yeah, that was literally the Frank had that riff,
Yeah.
and he played around, and then we just immediately like they started jamming, and that was it. It was like it became that.
That's fucking crazy. So I've had a bunch of people mention Dead Guy, and there's like bands through people mention. Sometimes I'm like, even then I didn't hear about him, and sometimes I hear bands now, and I'm like, I didn't know they existed. And then some guy actually just like shit on me on my YouTube. He was like, this guy doesn't know anything about like early '94 bands. I'm like, bitch, this is about the late '90s scene, motherfucker. Like, there's some things I don't know. But then I go back and I'll listen to him now because of these conversations, and I was just listening to get to Dead Guy, and I was like, how the fuck did I not know about this band? They're so good. I was like, this is so good, especially that heavy of a sound in '95 to me. I don't know, I thought it was fucking awesome.
It was something for sure. We just took that thing and that record we did in, I'm going to say 7 days plus including mixing, 7 or 8 days.
Was that just because of the budgets you had, or?
Yeah. Well, we did that record not for Victory, but for a different label called Engine, which was part of Blackout Records as well. And we did the record and it was like zero budget, but I mean, we also did the original, 7-inch in like a day or maybe 2 days, and same thing for Work Ethic. It was like 2 or 3 days at the max. So then we had a whole week in the studio to do the full length. That record wound up sitting. We finished it, mixed it, and the master tapes, the mix down, there was a DAT at that time, sat in the tape vault to Traxxas because the owner of the label didn't pay the money didn't pay the balance. So it sat in jail for like 6 months, I'm going to say at least. And then Dave Rosenberg, the drummer, contacted Tony and Victory, and Tony bought the masters out from under and paid for it. So then that record came out on Victory, and that was my first record on Victory, and then that led to all the other Victory Records bands coming to me.
So I put a note down to talk about that. Like, was there any labels out there? I guess from like your perspective, my perspective of this is that bands have to deal with the most shit. Like they're not guaranteed making money. They have to they'll get upfront from a label and then they got to pay it back. It's basically labels like a bank. But what you do is that you are a part of the cog that you get paid for your service and that's it. Like you don't have to wait for money to come in, right? And like deal with all that bullshit.
No, unless there's no. But then as far as besides royalties, yes, no, I get paid and that's it. And they don't get their masters until they pay the balance. It's that simple.
Do you ever have an issue dealing with record labels? I guess is my question.
Yeah, there's been issues before, for sure. But in general, no, because they're already shelling out the money for the release, and then they just have to. It's just very simple. No auto mechanic is going to let you drive the car off the lot unless you paid the bill. Same concept, pretty simple.
Did you ever have any bands in the studio where they were kind of venting about a label where you kind of get nervous, oh shit, I don't want to work with these guys in the future, or did you just not get involved with that?
No, I just don't. I hate the business side of the business, even though I know it's necessary. I just want to chase that thing of those moments in the studio and chasing the magic where it's just it's the best feeling in the world when you discover something that was an accident and you go, oh my God, what happened there? Listen to that part. Oh, it's so good. Everybody gets super stoked, and that's the best thing.
You started working at Tracks East in 92.
91, yeah, 91.
91,
yeah.
Okay. So from then until let's say about the mid 90s, what was that like for you? How many hours were you putting in? How were you learning how to get better at what you were doing? What did that look like?
Yeah, it was just working as many hours as possible. When I was in a band and we were in the studio, I was the first one to be there, last one to leave. I wanted to be in the studio. I always wanted to be in the studio. It's it's the best place. It's this little magical creation lab that it was the best. So I just would spend as much time as possible, and then even afterwards I would try to do stuff on my own with a drum machine, and I would record the tape, play, come up with little ditties or just whatever.
Were you paying attention to any other records to kind of see what was going on, or just keep? I've asked this a bunch of times to people who've recorded records and stuff.
Yeah, I would pay attention, but and I just didn't know how to particular. I knew a lot of the basics. I went to school for it, but I don't count that. I knew a lot of it to begin with, just from recording with 4 tracks, and then I had an 8-track recorder and a bunch of little Tascam mixer. And I just learned how to do things. And then it was just more about I'd hear a guitar sound and I'd be like, why does it sound like this? And I was always good growing up as a kid. I was very good at doing impressions. Remember guys Rich Little or somebody like impressionists that, made a little right. So I could always do voices. I could always imitate things. I could figure out how to make a sound. So when I hear a guitar sound, I would just kind of mouth the sound and go, oh, it sounds like, and then I would try to grab the EQ and I would turn the knobs until it kind of sounded something like that. I would try to shape it. And I didn't know what I was doing at first, but then I kind of figured out how to do it in that way. I would just hear it and just try to imitate the sound.
Were you listening to a lot of music at that time? Were you recording it, or were you kind of burned out of just after some point be I don't really want to listen to this shit after I'm done with the shift?
Well, yeah, towards later on, yeah, for sure. I let you now, I don't listen to music much in the car.
You're just all audiobooks.
Yeah. Oh no, it's literally podcasts or audiobooks. That's it. Talk radio, anything, it's more of a palate cleanser than anything. I love music, but it's less, if I'm in the studio for 12 hours listening to music, that's the last thing I want to do when I get in the car. I want to turn my brain off and engage it in a different way,
When did you start noticing bands were asking for you specifically to produce their records?
It happened, I'd say in the mid 90s. That's why I really consider Now it'll be like next year I could really consider it really the time where my career really started. But bands would, I guess, locally, like in the local scene stuff, it would just happen. It happened early on, like bands like it's because it's not just always also about the technical stuff. You also have to be a decent hang in the studio. You can't be this like can't be a dick, and you can't be just too weird or standoffish, or it's just a lot of it's just like managing, like it's managing personalities. It's so much of not just the technical side of things, and how to navigate that, and how to deal with, like, without going into any specifics, but like if the band, like if there's obvious tension in the band or two guys hate each other, and just try to like mitigate that, and like you have to try and make it all work together just to try and just to produce what you need.
Do you have any like tricks for that? Like, if you see two guys, you're like, okay, you just know that to keep them in separate rooms, or you say something where they kind of like just dismiss the
Yeah,
fact.
it's just really by feel. It's just always a thing, and you have to just constantly pay attention, and you got to pay attention to the peripheral stuff like that, and without trying to draw too much attention to it either. Unless, like, obviously they're having a physical altercation, you got to break it up. Not to say that hasn't happened, but
Knock on wood.
not gonna, again, not going to, no, it has. I'm saying I'm not going into specifics,
Oh,
but
okay. Yeah,
you know,
you don't have to do that.
yeah, yeah, definitely don't have to do that. But or where it's almost come to blows, and you try and, like, you have to really kind of like, all right, listen, hey, let's step back, let's figure this out, let's talk this out. So you have to be parent, psychologist, motivational speaker, on top of trying to work with the songs, work with the music, work with the arrangements, and then get the performances and deal with the technical side of things and make sure the sonics are good. It's a lot. If I had to think about every component of what I do, I'd probably go insane because there's a lot. I don't really think about the process until, if you have to dissect it and break it down to each individual component, like when you're like people that like something like this where they ask me like, what about this and what about that? You have to deal with all of it. You have to mitigate all of it and try to somehow still come up with a cohesive product, and that the band's happy with, that the label's happy with, and hopefully that people like. It's definitely a lot to bite off, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Was there some point where you kind of decided, I'm going to start saying no to bands if I don't want to work with them, or have you always just let everyone in?
I definitely let everyone in during the Tracks East days for sure, because I was a staff engineer there, and then bands would request me or whatever. And then it had happened later on as I started working with bigger projects or whatever. Not to say that I'm above anybody at all, not even close. I also don't want to put my name on something that I can't stand behind either. So all of a sudden it was like it got to the point towards the end where it was like, oh, well, this band wants to book you. Why don't you want to work with it? I'm like, because they're terrible. And I don't want to put my name on. So, you know what I mean? Because sometimes it's hard for people to differentiate. They hear a bad band and they see my name on it, and I go, it's fine. I don't mind helping bands along, but it's like if it's something. I mean, there's been other things where I had to pull out of it because it was like there was some lyrical content that I was not standing behind at all. Some really dark, crazy, I mean, I'm Jewish, it's like anti-Semitic stuff that, like, I just didn't want to work with it. I didn't want to work with a skinhead Nazi band. Sorry, like, I'm not going to do it. Just because they want to book the time, I don't want to do it. So, yeah, that's happened. But in general, I mean, everybody's good, and there's always merit and value in everything. You can always find the good in just about everything. I can't find the good in a skinhead Nazi band, but
I'm surprised they wanted to work with you in general. That seems a little
yeah, well,
off-brand.
I don't think they knew I was Jewish, but they booked the time, and then I find it out, and I'm like, these guys are Nazis, like, straight up. I can't. I'm not doing it.
Who was that? Screwdriver? Was that band?
No, no.
You don't have to say who it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, I don't even want to say it because they're going to come after my.
But that at that particular one, like, Eric from Trax understood, and we called the guys, and they were the band was actually like, we get it, we understand, and that was it. We get it. You're not down with hating Jews. It's cool.
We understand. Sorry, we got to go to a rally now.
Yeah, sorry. We're just gonna, yeah. go do something else now. Let's go burn down. We're gonna go burn a temple down. See you later.
Was there a band like you kind of had a predetermined idea about that you didn't want to work with and you said yes, and then you were like, wow, I actually am glad I said yeah?
So repeat the question, sorry.
Meaning, like, was there a band that initially you were thinking, I don't think I want to work with these guys, and you're like, somehow you decided to, and then you were surprised about the record being like you like the record or you like the experience working with them?
No. In general, I would, especially towards the like towards the end part of like my tracks these days, like it was because it's like a tracks because so we were getting so many good bands, and like we were the only from that whole New Brunswick scene and all the adjacent around there, like we were like basically us and like that Big Blue Meanie out in Hoboken, Jersey City rather. We were the only two games in town for like really good studios to do stuff. So generally we were attracting like the cream of the crop for the most part. It was great. I mean, there were still times where I was like, I don't want to do this. And then like I would do, if I wouldn't do it, Eric would take it and he would do the bands too. So in general, it was always stuff that I was really excited about. Or, I'd hear stuff and I would, you can, like I said, you can always find the good in it. It's like, okay, there's something you can grab onto to go, okay, let's try to cultivate this because this particular aspect of this band is really good and we're going to try and just get that out there.
Lifetime does Hello Bastards in '95. They had so background was part. Were you because you obviously you said you did their 7-inch in '91.
Did the 7-inch in '91, and then they did background with someone else, and then they did this other thing, the Tinnitus thing, which I then remixed, and then that led to us working together again with Hello Bastards because Ari had been going to Tracks East even before that because he was in this other hardcore band called Enough. And he worked with Eric when Trax was like a basement studio, it was in his father's basement in Spotswood originally before they moved to the South River location.
So when they come in and do that though, the sound is, I think, for me personally, I think the sound's dramatically different from background.
Oh yeah.
Like, did they talk about that in the studio and say like, yeah, this is going to be different from that, or would they just?
No, it was more of a question of like, I think they weren't even happy with the sound of background anyway. And then they came back to Tracks. And then I did that record and yeah, it was just like, I think Dan had like a different guitar amp. I can't remember what he had, but I basically said, yeah, we gotta change out we gotta change out the guitar amp. It's not good. And he did. And then we did Hello Bastards. And then we went further on Jersey's Best, obviously. And I made Dan change his guitar tone again. He went like through 3 different amps. It was like I made him change the amp for Hello Bastards. I made him change the amp for Jersey's Best. And then I made him change the amp for Kid Dynamite as well. And then we kept going with that sound after that. Then he settled on his amp.
What was missing though? Like what were you getting feeling wise from the first amp on like Hello Bastards?
Oh, I forget it. I think it was a crate or something. It was just really not good sounding. It was just terrible sounding. And then you got this other crate, which actually sounded decent enough. And then basically was like, and then as also I was growing as an engineer and knowing how to get sounds better. And then when we pull up the same amp, and I'm like, no, it's not as good this time. We gotta step it up.
So I think Jersey's Best is better than Hello Bastards. Just they're both great.
I know a lot of people like Hello Bastards over. I think it's more of the songs than it is anything. Sonically, I think Jersey's Best is better. They're both great. They're both great in their own respect. I mean, there's so many great songs on Hello Bastards, but I have an affinity towards Jersey's Best.
Jersey's is it's more digestible out of the two. Again, I don't think anything negative. I love Hello Bastards. I think Jersey's Best answer. When I first heard it, I was just like, there's a hook in every fucking song, man.
Every single song. Yep.
Was that the same session when they did Swamps in New Jersey? Was that during Jersey's Best Answers?
That's their because we did the 7-inch we cut first. We cut Boys No Good with Somewhere in the Swamps of Jersey. And then Boys No Good wound up being, we didn't even remix it, I don't think. If I remember right. No, I don't think we remixed it. So that's on obviously on Jersey's Best, and then they kept Somewhere in the Swamps off.
Why did they keep that off of Jersey's Best Dancer? That song is fucking amazing.
It's great, but I guess I think they just wanted it to be, and I respect it, and I kind of like it. It's like a very, very old school approach, like the way the Beatles used to do in the '60s. Like the singles, the 7 inches were never on the records.
Yeah, I was really happy when Spotify came out and like I could just put it into a playlist. It's like it took me so long to fucking just have this digitally to fucking play. Snapcase comes in for progression through unlearning. Like, what was that experience like with those guys? Because I felt like when who's the guitar player? Who's like the guy with the glasses? Frank
Vicario.
I felt like him coming into the band really stepped up the sound of the band because he was so technical on guitar and it added this whole new sound to them.
It did. I mean, but if you really look at to me, the Steps EP is where they kind of really settled in on their sound. I think we built on what they did on Steps on progression. Because Looking Glass Self is almost a different band. Like Tim is even the drummer on some of the tracks. It was like that record was very piecemeal. It was recorded in two different sessions.
Ah.
And then Steps was, obviously it's only an EP, but that's what got me interested in the band. When Victor, he was like, "Hey, we want to send Snapcase," I was like, "Hell yeah, I'm in. Let's go. Let's do this."
Real quick, if you're looking for an explainer video or someone to do motion graphics for your company, check out my company, drive80.com, and you can email me at mike@drive80.com for more info. That's all I got to say. So now back to the interview. Because of that, did you have this, I don't know, like, I mean, I'm sure you're bringing the same energy to every band, but with that record, like, and you were, like, excited for it, did you kind of have, all right, guys, like, I really want to make this fucking special, or did it just happen on its own?
It happened on its own. It's one of those things where when you're doing it, it's like, yeah, this is something. It's obviously like kicking in with Caboose or whatever. That wasn't the first song recorded, though, but obviously it's the first song on the record. But yeah, I was super excited about it.
What was it like working with those guys?
It was great, and it was just it was a blur. I don't remember very much specifics again because it was so fast. I just remember laughing a lot, going to Olive Garden almost every single night. The guys were all about Olive Garden because they were all, vegan or vegetarian at the time. So it was like, and especially in the late '90s, there wasn't a lot of like options that wasn't just like complete garbage to eat. So Olive Garden it was.
That's amazing. What are the questions you're typically asked about that snare sound? Like everyone, that's just so iconic. I mean, I literally did a poll about it on my Instagram, and like the majority of people chose that as the best snare sound.
It's of the era because like so many bands at that point, like that was like the sound,
Yeah.
like the high tune snare and I think it was a function of half the time of people not knowing how to get a lot of like pop out of the snare in the studio. So the trick was like just dime it, just crank it as high as you possibly can, and that's it. And that's where the crack comes from, as opposed to like technique and or studio technique to really get that extra punch out of the snare.
Was it like a piccolo? Wasn't that a piccolo snare?
Nope. Everybody says that's I've talked about it a million times. This is the big misconception. It is not a piccolo snare. It is actually an 8-inch deep snare. It's a deep snare, but it's also a 13-inch snare. It's not a standard 14-inch diameter. It's smaller diameter, but deep, but 8 inches deep. And it's a wood snare. It's not a metal snare. It's a Ludwig. I think they call it a soprano snare is what it actually is technically called. It's 13 inches by 8. Super deep.
Were you researching different musical instruments at that time, like snares, like drum kits, amps and stuff, or did you just learn about them when people would bring them in the studio?
I learned about when people bring in the studio for the most part. I mean, I would always read up on things. And you pick up tidbits here and there. It's not like now with the internet and everything is available to everybody. Yeah, no, it was just you learn as you go. That's pretty much it.
I'm kind of jumping ahead of 2000 here, but like to me, the snare sound on Designs for Automotion it's different.
It is different, but on a few songs we used the progression snare on like Energy Dome.
I love that song.
That's the same snare. Yep. There's like a handful of tracks, like 3 or 4 tracks on designs that we use. That's the progression snare, but otherwise we used a bunch of, because that record we actually spent like a month on. We actually had all this luxury. It was like, oh, let's really do this different. Let's take our time and let's use different snares for things, and let's use different amps, and let's change it up, different guitar pedals, blah blah blah. So we just like, that was like the first time I was like, oh, let's spend a little time making this record.
Do you think you get a better record having more time or less time?
It's a slippery slope for sure. I try not to overthink things ever, and some bands like to. To me, the longer you take on a record, the more you overthink it. And not to say that you should bang through everything, because I don't know if I could make a record in 2 weeks like I did like back in the day. Honestly, the funny thing is, you think it's faster to make a record with Pro Tools. It's actually slower than doing it on tape, because you have limited choices. If you're on tape, you're on 24 or maybe 48 tracks if you have 2 tape machines blocked together, and that's it. And you have to like commit to everything. And I try to still to keep that concept, because if you overthink it, and you know, this in this era of the way everything's done in Pro Tools, you run the risk of never being done. There's always, hey, one more thing, one more mix revision, one more tweak to this part. What about this? What about this? It's like, just, again, yes or no, simple decisions. Good? Yeah? No? All right, what else? What can we do?
So you think that you wouldn't be able to do it in 2 weeks because of Pro Tools, or you just don't think the way you work now?
It's just different now. And yeah, I mean, I've done some fast records still, but in general, no, it's takes longer. And people just, it's just different, because now you're also like editing and you're looking at a screen as opposed to just listening to what's coming out of the speakers. And we all fall into everybody I know in this profession that I do, you know, like you all fall victim to it a little bit. I try to really keep it as like, let's just think, listen, feel, react. That's it.
So I was friends with the guys from Boxcar. Remember that then?
Sure.
They're not in your Wikipedia.
God, no, I'm trying to remember. I did work with Boxcar.
I think they recorded their whole album in 3 days, I think someone said. They were on Red Leader Records. Do you remember this at all?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just wondering why. Yeah, I just saw that they weren't on there. I was like, I wonder, like, what puts a band on your Wikipedia and not. Like, I guess you don't have control over that.
I don't edit. I don't make my own Wikipedia page up. There's probably things on there that I haven't even looked at. I can't tell you the last time I looked at my Wikipedia page, but I'm sure there's stuff on there that's missing. I'm sure there's stuff on there that's not accurate.
Were you like attending any shows back then, and like Jersey shows, or did you just like?
Oh, of course.
Really? Do you like? Where were you going?
I mean, New Brunswick, Melody Bar, Court Tavern. Back in the early '90s, I saw some City Gardens shows. I saw Bad Brains in City Gardens, which was awesome.
Yeah, because like there was really no, like, nowadays everything's online, so you can see what someone looks like. So if you're out in public, I was like, oh shit! Like, did you kind of get away with going to shows and no one knew who you were?
Yeah, well, I was out of place because back in the '90s, when I was doing all those punk records, I still had long hair from when I was like in the band. I had like until I cut my hair short when I was 2004, something like that. So I had at least like shoulder length hair at the time. So I looked kind of out of place. I looked like, if it was going to be told with the hair, I looked like Kevin Seconds. Aside from that, yeah, no, it's whatever. I like kind of prefer the anonymity of it, just like being the guy behind the scenes that helps make these records, and that's fine. I don't need to be harassed. And now I get like I get people coming up to me, oh my god, it's like, that's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I'm appreciative. Trust me, I'm appreciative that anybody gives a crap about what I do. But it's just I prefer just to like that's why it'd be fine if I was playing in bands, but like I'd rather just be just in the studio for the most part. I like playing shows. I didn't like anything around the 45 minutes being on stage, hour being on stage. Like, I love that, but aside from that, everything else is like bleh. I could definitely never have to deal with that ever again.
So what was it like playing in the band with Frank Iero and the Patients?
Well, I never toured with Frank Air and the Patients. I actually was just I engineered on that record on Parachutes, the drum tracking, and then I mixed the record. As we were doing drum tracking, so Ross Robinson produced that, and I was just there like originally. Like Ross is pretty much like he doesn't really engineer so much, so he usually has somebody like at least set up, get engineer for him, set up, get drum sounds, whatever. This is when he had the house studio in his house, and Frank and I have known each other obviously from the scene and whatever back in the day. I mean, I saw Mike Chem at Bloomfield Cafe. Yeah, I saw Mike Chem at the Bloomfield Cafe like back early on with like 150 people, wherever the hell it was in there. It was great. It was awesome. So I was setting up, and they were doing takes because Ross likes to record the band like live with like full takes, and then like I heard one song on that record, "I'm a Mess," and I'm like, oh, this sounds kind of like the one riff, like da na 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 na. I was like, it sounds like a little bit like Lifetime, like How We Are, off of Jersey's Best, and I'm like, cool. So I literally picked up the bass and started. I hadn't played in forever, but I picked up the bass and started messing around. And then Frank's like, "You want to jam? You want to play on this stuff?" So I literally just sat in just for like one of the takes, and then it was like Frank's like, "Dude, play bass on the record." I was like, "All right." So I play bass. So I'm listed as a member of the band on the record, but I did not tour with them.
Did you want to?
It would have been fun. Like there was actually ironically, there was talk of me going to Australia with them on that tour. That they got into that accident. Like the bass player was there was possibility that I was going to fill in for the bass player because had just his wife just gave birth or was really close to giving birth. It was right around that time, so there was like he might not go. So if you want to do it, I'm like, I'm in. Let's do it. Be fun to get back on stage after I hadn't played on stage in at that point like 10, 15 years or whatever the hell it was. It would have been great, but like ironically, it would have been that's when it would have been during when they had that accident and they got dragged underneath that bus.
I never heard about this.
Oh yeah, yeah. They had some crazy accident. It was outside the Twitter offices, apparently in Sydney. Somebody grabbed them and like dragged Frank and Paul Clegg, their manager, and Evan, the guitar player, and Frank's brother-in-law, down the street. Like it was crazy.
Wait, they dragged them on the road?
Yeah, like somehow I don't know. I don't know. I can't tell you the whole story because I don't. Like I'm sure there's a record of it somewhere online. You can talk to about it. I thought you actually had interviewed Frank.
Nah, I haven't gotten them on.
Oh, okay. You interviewed Mikey, right?
No, I haven't interviewed any of those guys.
You didn't interview anyone. Okay.
Mm-mm. I mean, we talked about Mike Chem like in different interviews, but I've never got those guys. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, anyway, they had some crazy accident, and then like they wound up being in the hospital. It was like pretty wild.
Holy shit.
Anyway, I almost was on that tour, but I didn't go on that tour.
Wow, I'm actually like Googling this whole thing right now just to see.
Yeah,
like,
it's a thing. It's definitely a thing.
Oh my God, that's crazy. Yeah, I never met Frank back in the day. He used to go to shows, and I knew his wife Jamia because she used to put on a lot of shows with Ricky at Wayne Firehouse.
Yep, the Wayne Firehouse.
Did you ever go to shows there?
Saves. I saw Saves at the Wayne Firehouse.
Would you see them on stage, or did you see them in the smaller room?
In the smaller room.
Holy shit, I was at that show. That's crazy.
That's funny.
Did we ever meet each other in person back then? I don't think we did.
It's possible.
We were going to, I mean, I was going to shows all the time, obviously, just playing and stuff like that. But, and I'd known of your name at that point. And I remember when we were recording, we went with Chris Badami and with Portrait Studios.
Oh yeah, right. Portrait. Right.
Yeah, our first band we recorded with Chris, and we always tell him that, like, we were the reason he got into the punk scene. And he's like, yep. He's like, you guys were like the first punk band, and all of a sudden, Right Turn Eddie starts coming in and all these bands and shit.
That's funny.
But yeah, I remember like because we would hear about you, and then we listened to Hello Bastards and all the records, and even Jersey's Best Answers, and that's when Boxcar went with you. And we were like, man, I'd love to fucking work with this guy, but we just never had a budget, or we were never gonna be like big enough to like fucking make any sense of it to go work with it. Did you work with Ross Robinson a lot of stuff? Because I'm seeing you have credit for Glassjaw.
Yeah, Ross and I met. Ross and I have been friends now at this point now for 25 years. It's crazy. But we met in '99. I mixed one of the bands, Amen, for Roadrunner. It was like a LA punk band. I mixed a record for him then. We met during that. Then I mixed Glassjaw, and we did some tracking with Glassjaw, and then we tracked some stuff with At the Drive-In. And yeah, we've been friends for a very long time, but we worked together on and off few things. But he's a producer, I'm a producer. I like engineering for other producers, but in general, I like to kind of just do it all. But it's fun working with him, and we still work to this day. I mean, I mixed the last Touche Amore record that he did.
I saw that. I saw Lament on your Instagram, and I was like, wait a minute, I thought Ross Robinson recorded this. And then I was reading, I was like, what's the connection there?
Yeah, no, we've been friends for a very long time. We hit it off immediately, like the second we met, and we just been friends and worked together on and off. I mean, we did The Cure together, just a bunch of things throughout the years.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. Like, I saw The Cure on there, and actually before that, just because it was 2001, you played bass on the Vanilla Ice record.
I did.
How is that? Because isn't that the one that Ross Robinson recorded?
No, it was the one after the one Ross Robinson recorded.
Okay, like, what was that like? I mean, I guess like that's got to pop up for a lot of people just because it's Vanilla Ice and it's wild.
It's Vanilla, yeah. It was the next record called Bipolar. It was a double record, so one record was like straight up traditional rap, like he was trying to go back. He went back with his original manager that did Ice Ice Baby when he did Ice Ice Baby and all that stuff. And so he did the hip hop record, and then he did like a more of a metal record, like that Hard to Swallow record that Ross did. So I engineered on the metal stuff, and then I just by default I wound up playing bass on it because I'm a bass player.
How was that experience?
It was fun. It was fun. Rob's a super nice guy. It was cool. I mean, we were in Texas, in the middle of like Plano, Texas, which was like kind of like whatever. But aside from that, it was great.
Yeah, I just saw some interview with him and Steve-O. I didn't realize he was such a smart dude with like real estate. That's how he's all his money and shit.
Yep, he's a smart. Like I said, he's a smart guy. You have the thing about obviously the public persona, and then I got to know Rob, the guy. Like it was totally great. It was a lot of fun. It was just I was down in Texas there for like 2 or 3 weeks working on that stuff.
Was there any bands that you were, because I saw The Cure and that made me, I wrote a question down of like, was there any bands that you were kind of intimidated about before they got in the studio?
Well, The Cure was one because I loved The Cure growing up. That took a while to get used to, but then I worked on the record for like 6 months, so I got used to it pretty quickly. Took a couple of weeks to not freak out, and then I was fine.
What was it like telling them to do it over in the beginning? Were you kind of like, hey?
I wasn't the producer, so Ross produced. I was just the engineer, and I wound up mixing the record. Very different thing. I'm just there on the technical side of things.
So they were like the only band that you were like, oh God, this is like, I don't know what this is gonna, just got, like I said, the intimidated part, because I'm looking through the list. I'm trying to think of any other bands that would have stood out like that.
Yeah, no, intimidated. It wasn't. I wasn't intimidated. I was starstruck because I don't get starstruck, and I've worked with some famous people, but that one took a second, but it was fine. The first 2 weeks we were there, like I said, it was weird because I was supposed to originally just fill in. There was this other engineer, Mike Frazier, who Ross worked with a lot in the early 2000s, like on Slipknot Iowa and like all that stuff after that, and like that. He worked with him on Iowa. He worked with him Blood Brothers, Burn Piano Island Burn, like a bunch of things. He was supposed to go with Ross to do The Cure because Ross signed The Cure to his imprint on Geffen. I was just going to fill in for pre-production for 2 weeks. And like 2 days into it, Ross was like, dude, they love you. Robert loves you. He's going to ask you to stay. And he did. Like the next day, Robert asked me to stay on the record. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to say no to Robert Smith. So that was that. 6 months. 6 months living in London. It was pretty wild.
Did you actually get to go out in London, or were you just stuck in the studio the whole time?
we were in the studio pretty much. We had basically like one day off a week, essentially. Sundays we'd have off, but we were just, yeah, it didn't matter because it was like just it was one of the best experiences I ever had in the studio. Like I said, I'm in London, I'm working with The Cure, and I'm also at Olympic Studios, which is like one of the most legendary, probably the second most legendary studio in England besides Abbey Road, which it doesn't exist anymore, but it was at that point. I mean, so many classic records were made in that studio. Zeppelin, Queen, and Rolling Stones, and Radiohead, the Bends, and like just forget it. Just an unbelievable amount of unbelievable records. So just to be in that, feel the ghosts in the room of being in that kind of like hallowed halls of this crazy recording studio.
What was like their work ethic and recording ethic like, I guess? Their style or
Oh, The Cure?
The Cure, yeah.
They were, we worked, it was long days, and Robert would do his vocals late at night. Actually, you kind of picture that the quote unquote godfather of goth is not going to do his vocals at 3 p.m. He's going to do vocals at like 2 a.m. when it's dark out. So perfect,
It's fucking amazing. This is kind of jumping back a little bit, but when Lifetime breaks up and then Dan comes in with Kin Dynamite, what was like the feeling of that recording? Did he feel, I don't know, like I guess like for me looking at that, it's either you feel like you got something to prove because the band breaks up, or you're just like it's a fresh start and you're excited. Like I don't know, I guess what was the vibe like for that record?
it was kind of a little bit of both, but it was definitely like I think Dan definitely had something to prove, and he was very determined, and it was great. Like I was, we did demos at Chris Conley's house, ironically enough, and it was awesome. But we no maybe no I think we did demos for at Conley's for Shorter Faster Ladder. I'm pretty sure we did it for the second record. So the first record I did some rehearsal. No, that's right. I just did some rehearsals in Philly with the band. I went to their rehearsal studio, and it was really great. It was great from the get go. I didn't know Jason at that point. It was an unknown entity, but I knew obviously Dave Wagenschutz and I knew Dan, so I knew there was going to be something there. And it was just like literally from the jump, it was pretty awesome, and just really the next step up from Lifetime. It was just it was pretty seamless transition actually.
I was surprised, not surprised, like I felt like they caught fire so fast, and they just were so popular so fast. It was like holy shit. But I guess that made sense because I had so many years in Lifetime. But I remember just like hearing about them or seeing shows or whatever. I was like, Jesus Christ, these guys, I think they're like within 6 months or some shit. That seemed like they were just blowing up.
They were, but it was a lot of the factor of obviously the Lifetime thing. It was definitely jumping off from Lifetime, which was great. And then the fact that Jason was just so good live, and he was such a good frontman for the band. It was just like it was pretty undeniable. The second you see them play, you're like, okay, that's it.
Yeah. Did you get affected at all by like around like late 90s into the 2000s? I was asked this about like the whole Napster thing and downloading. Did that have any effect on you?
It didn't have an effect on me, but I know the bands obviously it kind of sucked for.
Were labels like kind of like less like a little bit nervous or a little bit tight about budgets and things like that?
No, they weren't nervous. It was more just it was more about like once that was like really a thing took hold, and it's like, hey, make sure that nobody, you have to basically be very tight-lipped about like when you're doing the rough mixes or when you're doing the mixes with the band, like do not share this, making a CD or something. Do not share this with anybody. Don't give this to your friend. Oh, just let me just make a copy of it, man. I won't give it to anybody. Like it was always that thing. Like you always do that, and then like invariably somebody winds up leaking the record anyway. So
was there ever one that you got shit for that it got leaked that you did?
That I got shit for? No. I mean, besides Let It Unfold You.
I was gonna ask. So I read something. I think it was like your Instagram.
Well, Buddy leaked the record himself.
Okay, well, was that because you think you put in like your Instagram thing, like the Let It Unfold You story or something. Is that what it was?
I don't remember.
You put like there's a wild story about Let It Unfold You.
Well, probably that. But I mean, if you look at interviews with Buddy, he widely admits it. He leaked the record himself because we did the record, it was done, and it got shelved until because we did that record for Drive Through originally. I got hired by Richard and Stephanie from Drive Through to do that to do the record. We started the record. It was we were making it for Drive Through. Then while we were in the studio, the Drive Through re-released the Depths of Dreams EP, and it sold like something like ridiculous, like 90,000 copies in like a span of like 6 weeks or something like that. That was when that stuff was like taking off like crazy, that whole Screamo thing. At that point, Drive Through had the upstream deal with MCA Geffen. We went from making the record for Drive Through to making the record for Geffen while we were in the studio. And all of a sudden, Rich and Stephanie are out as far as like the creative direction of A&R and things, and then we have people at Geffen calling the shots. And then they go, oh, we don't have a single. We need you guys to go back in the studio and make a single. Which, to their credit, we went in and did the two singles, Buried Alive and Rubbers for Drinking, the ones that wound up being the singles and the videos for the record. We went back to a different studio, went to Mission Sound in Brooklyn, made those two songs. We get them, and then the head of the label decides, oh, you know what? We need you to make this record with like an A-list producer, like a Jerry Finn or someone like that. And the band's like, we love this record. We don't want to do that. So they negotiated, I guess, the record it was shelved. It was done. And Buddy's like, screw you. I'm going to leak the record. So he leaked the record in February of 2004. It got a buzz. The record sat at just under gold for like 12 years. And then finally, because of streaming or whatever, it actually pushed it over gold. But if the record hadn't leaked, who knows? The record leaking was probably a good thing in reality. I always go like, well, if the record didn't leak, the record would have been gold 10 years ago. But the truth is, we don't know exactly if that's the case or not.
Did you mind that he did that, or you just not care?
I didn't know until way after the fact, only a few years ago, that I knew that, because I was like, somebody leaked the record. And then Buddy's like, it was me. I'm like, okay.
Like at the time though, were you like kind of like, because you make points on that stuff, so I mean that's where it would take away from the streaming and all, it would take away from that from you.
But yeah, it's it's gonna do what it's gonna do. I can only hope that I do a good enough job that people care about it, and it connects to people in some way. If I did my job and the band did their job, then that's all I can do, and they have to just let it go from that point.
I think it was you I read an interview with. I think it was where you were talking about working with Keith Buckley from Every Time I Die, and I think it was you that said he was one of the best vocalists you've ever worked with, or like listened or have worked with, or something like that. Was that you?
It's possible. I mean, I love Keith's voice. I love Keith. Loved those two records I did with him.
How was that working with those guys on those?
It was great. It was really great. I mean, it's just the whole time, just fun, creative, really funny. Like Andy Williams is like just a crack up. I love that guy. He's like one of the greatest storytellers you'll ever meet. I could sit and listen to that guy tell stories all day. He's awesome. But yeah, it was the Big Dirty was a really fun record, and so was New Junk. They were both great.
I heard I read an interview in All Press back then, and they used to do these spotlights on new records that were coming up before they were recorded or before they were out, whatever. And I remember they did like a photo shoot with these guys, and Keith was like, yeah, like you guys asked us about this and we didn't have anything on the horizon, but I told the band that we now have to write one. And I think that was the Big Dirty. So it's like they didn't even have that record. They weren't even thinking about it, and then they got asked by AP, and they're just like, oh, I guess we're going to do a record now.
Well, they had contacted me because they wanted to, I guess they went to Tracks East to do Hot Damn, and they did it with Eric Rachel, but they went there because of Dead Guy. That was like the whole thing. And I knew that, and when I heard, actually Dan from A Static Lullaby turned me on to them, like to the Last Night in Town record, and I was like, I got to work with this band. And then finally, 3 records later, we did. It was awesome.
Cool, dude. Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I'm just like looking through this list of just so many, because I'm just trying to think of like there's just what bands I want to know about like working with. But it sounds like you've had a pretty good fucking run so far.
Yeah, it's been fun, man. I just, like I said, I still absolutely love this job. I get a kick out of it every day. Even when it's hard, it still beats just about anything.
And you're back in.
I'm back in New Jersey.
Yes, that's it.
That's something I never thought would happen. Honestly, my wife and I moved back 2002, and I wound up taking over Will Putney's old studio, or Machine's old studio. It was Machine's studio, and then it was Will Putney's studio because Will was Machine's assistant.
Oh, really?
Yep.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. He came up as Machine's assistant, and then and now I took over the studio.
Oh, you're at the studio right now.
Yeah, I'm there right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Isn't that under the bridge in like or in right before you get into Hoboken?
No, that's the first machine shop.
Yes.
The Weehawken one. The second one's in Belleville.
Yeah, I had a client years ago when I started doing I was doing websites and stuff. They were called Tangerine. Do you remember this? They were a mastering company.
Vaguely, yeah.
He was like called the Jolly Roger or something before that.
Okay.
Oh, I just remember I was there asking him questions for doing that, and I hear this guitar stuff, and he's like, "Oh, that's Machine. He's down the hall." I was like, "What the fuck?"
Oh, yeah. They were in that building. It was the same building as Crush Management, and like they were all like everything was all together. Right.
Is Machine still doing his thing, or is he out of the business?
I think he is. I don't know how much he's doing. He does stuff because he's in Jersey and he's also in Austin, so he goes back and forth. As far as I know, I saw him. He came by here. Actually, some stuff actually still comes to the studio for him, ironically enough. And I called him and was like, "Hey, I've got some like old statements from like record labels here for you." He's like, "Yeah," and he happened to be in the area and he came by with his son, looking around the place.
That's
pretty funny.
How do you live like living back in Jersey?
Well, see, if I grew up in Central Jersey. I grew up in like East Brunswick. I don't know if I could move back to where I grew up because I had the opportunity to take over and buy tracks back in like early 2000, 2013, 2014. I actually went in and I met with Eric and then I'm driving around the area that I grew up in and I'm just like, I can't do it. I just couldn't do it. So my wife and I we're up in Essex County now. I don't know where you grew up.
I grew up in Jefferson, Morris County.
Morris County, okay.
I was like 10 minutes down the road from the Rockaway Mall.
Right, okay. I know exactly where you are. Yeah, because my wife, originally when we moved, she was working in Parsippany. So
yeah,
she was out there. Yeah. So, But where we are and where the studio is, Belleville, Essex County, I mean, we're only like, the studio is like 8.5 miles from downtown New York City. Our proximity to the city we love it. So, and we're like, close to a train, so we can take the train into the city. And my wife's in the city like every week. We're in the city like every weekend. We love that. Like if we could have really afforded to buy an apartment in New York City, we would have, but it's just out of control.
Yeah, dude. It's fucking nuts.
Yeah, no. So we were 18 years in LA. We had the opportunity to move back and the studio became available and it all happened within like a couple of days of each other. My wife was like, she had an opportunity with her work and a transfer and the studio became available. And I was like, you know what? All right, let's do it. Our family's still here and parents are getting older. And it was, a number of factors.
I could never move back to Jersey. I've been in North Carolina for like 8 years and I'll go up to visit sometimes and I'm like, I'm good. I gotta get the fuck out of here.
No. Well, but again, like I said, it's like I never thought I'd utter the words I'm moving back to Jersey. But life somehow, you can never predict it, man. It's crazy. But, honestly, the fact of the amount of space, the studio and the amount of space I have, that's only my own because I was in my studio in Orange County was like, it was 2-room facility and I had my room and it was great. And I made a lot of records there, but I have to always share it with like, the A room was always something else. And there was always just nonsense going on. And like the fact that I have like, 2,500 square feet, that's just my own. I don't have to deal with anybody. And it's a great space now to create and just like make records and just, and not be bothered is awesome. So it's like a total win-win. At the same time, the second I have to shovel snow, I'm like, screw this. You know what? I can deal. It's whatever. I grew up with it and I hated it and wanted to get out to Southern California. But I mean, SoCal is just, it's it's got its own issues. The weather's great, but it's got its own issues.
Yeah, I lived in LA in 2001 to 2003, and it wasn't my vibe.
Dude, it's fine. I never really fit in. I always felt like a tourist. You know what I mean? Because I'm an East Coaster through and through, so it's a different vibe.
Yeah.
And I could get into the LA thing, and that's fine, but it's a little too superficial for my taste for the most part. I definitely love the weather. The weather was like the big prime thing for me. But now it's just dude, it's so bad now. The traffic is beyond horrible. Home prices are just like, it's untenable. I don't know how anybody can afford to buy a house in LA. It's just like, Jersey. My friends are like, hey, all my friends that I grew up with are like, why are you moving back to Jersey? It's so expensive here. I was like, you realize I lived in Southern California for 18 years, right? Like this feels like this is like a tax break. This is like a price, like half the cost to buy a house.
Dude, if you really want to blow your mind, when I first moved down here to Raleigh, like holy shit.
Yeah, I have friends. It's going up. Yeah,
Yes.
No, I have lots of friends in Wilmington. I have lots of friends in North Carolina.
Yeah, we're the problem. We're the reason it's going up.
Yeah, no, it's like crazy, right? I know, it was like so cheap.
Yeah, now that I'm in downtown and now there's like places that are like $1 million. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? It's getting crazy. All right, man. So I'm gonna start wrapping this up. Before I ask the last two questions, is there a story you've always wanted to tell that you've never told in an interview that you'd like to tell now?
I can't say that there is one that I can reveal anyway.
Maybe like a funny moment, in like a recording session or something, or.
I mean, there's lots of funny moments, but I mean, honestly, like that homegrown record, Kings of Pop, I just remember the most thing I remember about making that record is just like cracking up the whole time. Because, it was just, I had so much fun making that record. It was one of my most fun records that I ever made.
Yeah, they seemed like they were funny guys. They were like mischievous.
Yeah, well, they're definitely, Adam, definitely, but John, especially Johnny. Johnny's just like, he's still the same. Like when I see him, when I talk to him, he's just the same. He's just a ball buster, and just like in the best possible way.
Yeah, they just got back together.
Oh, I know. I'm aware. He called me when it was happening. I'm very excited. I talked to Adam like the other day, as a matter of fact.
What was the record they did with the four old guys on the cover?
Act Your Age.
Act Your Age. Yeah. Was that the one you did?
No, I did Kings of Pop. Yeah, that record came out. I love the way that record came out. It was a lot of fun.
Are they going on tour? Wait, who are they touring with? Some bigger band.
They're not touring. They're just, well, at this point, they're not touring. They're playing a show. It's with the starting line.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of funny. I've noticed that with a lot of bands that I've done interviews with. They've been getting back together and playing. Like I never interviewed Homegrown, but I just did like Donuts and Glory a couple years ago. They're getting together.
You didn't do? I thought you recorded. You did a thing with Adam.
Homegrown?
Yeah. No.
No. There was like a period where everyone was interviewing those guys, and sometimes when that's happening, I kind of stay away from it. Like, I'm not saying they would do it, but I'm like, I was like, I kind of want to have the interviews that, even as I know you've gotten a lot of interviews too. Like, I usually try to. Well, with you, I've been trying to get on this thing for a while, but that's just like scheduling. But a lot of times I'll kind of just hold off a little bit. Like I just did Daryl from the Bull Weevils, and last year he did a ton of them. The hard thing is like you guys get asked the same stuff, and I'm sure I asked the same things and stuff. That's just like a different audience, Like I just like try to, just kind of distance myself from the other clutter so it stands out, and it's like, oh, there's this interview. I try not to do what everyone else is doing, basically. Try my best, but. Well, cool, man. All right, so last two questions. We'll wrap this up. Before I ask the last one, what would you like to plug? It could be about you. It could be about a friend or a cause. It could be about both.
Oh, I don't know. What am I plugging? I don't know what I'm plugging right now. I guess just plug the website, steveevetts.com. I'll just be on the lookout for some exciting things happening really soon.
How soon will these exciting things happen?
This year for sure. Some of it this year, some of it next year, early next year.
What are some of the records that actually just came out that like for anniversary? We got Jersey's Best Dancers got 25 years. Snapcase.
Jersey's Best is 20. Snapcase. Well, Jersey's Best was 90. So KX came out in 97. So
26.
That's
97. Okay.
26. I don't even know 99. So Designs for Automotion 25. Through Being Cool 25. got Killing Infinity 25, which they're doing the reunion with the original singer Dimitri.
Yeah, I saw that.
Turmoil, The Process of 25. That's crazy too. That's also the same year. Kid Dynamite, Shorter, Faster, Louder 25.
Oh, I love that. I got that on vinyl. I got that. Actually, I got Hello Bastards and Jersey West Dancers on vinyl. I fucking love it. Well, cool, man. All right, so last question. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
Just try to be true to yourself. Really, help others when you can, and if someone's down, try to pick them up. That's always a good one. But just really to stay true to yourself. I'm just at this point now, I'm older, just like I don't think I could be anything except who I am. Take it or leave it,